Hello fellow cyborgs and welcome to a reading vlog. A few days ago I started The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, which is part of the East of the Bell Jar project I'm doing with Acacia over at the Chaotic Little Book Corner. I had just come back from having a wander through a lavender field and I will share some footage of that throughout this vlog. I promise I wore my mask and I stayed away from people. So going into The Bell Jar, I didn't really have very many expectations. Things that I am pleased about is the writing style is not overly verbose, which is great. I am getting some like Shirley Jackson vibes, and I think that that is mostly because the language isn't, again, overly verbose, but also because the setting is like the 1960s or so. So our main character is Esther, and she has won a competition to be able to live in New York in an all-women's hotel and then get training at a fashion magazine, and it seems like she doesn't really know how to fit in with the other women who are there with her, and she's kind of deciding which friend group that she suits with better. She also seems to be struggling with just her identity as not being from the big city, not being from a big city, and then suddenly, being immersed in New York City culture. I am having kind of a hard time really getting into it. I've only read, let me look, less than 50 pages, 31 pages. And I don't think that's 100% this book's fault. I have definitely been preoccupied with organizing and just like purging stuff, and I think it's been good to be productive, but I think I've also been like, it's a little bit of my restlessness just coming out in a different way than normal. But I do also think that Plath's writing style doesn't 100% suit my tastes, but that's okay. So since I'm only 30 pages in, it sounds like I need to read some more, and then I will come back with some more thoughts. Hi there. So I have read some more in The Bell Jar. I'm 74 pages in and I'm at chapter 7. So a couple things that I didn't expect, and I'm enjoying it. All I know about The Bell Jar is that it shows a woman's descent into madness or having a mental breakdown. So far, that really hasn't been happening, and I've kind of been paying attention, and I suppose I could be reading into like some subtle, interesting thought processes, but it's so far that really hasn't been happening, and I'm about a third of the way in the book. Now, I definitely don't hate that, because what it ends up being is kind of more just like a slice of life about Esther, and I think too that we're spending equal time in her past learning how she got to the point where she's right now, and then also progressing the current storyline. So for instance, we just learned about Buddy something, who she's known through childhood, whose mother wants them to date and get married, but who she had a crush on, but then recently found out he was a hypocrite, and he pretended that he was this pure hometown sort of young man, but actually had an affair all summer with a waitress. So he is practically dead to her, and he's been convalescing at a hospital for patients with TB. He's a medical student, and he ended up contracting TB, and he doesn't realize that she's not into him at all anymore. And then she also, in the current timeline, has a parallel dating situation. She's been set up with a man named Constantine, who's a translator for the UN. She's recovering from an awful bout of food poisoning and trying to get ready to go on her first date with him. So that's pretty much what's been happening. The last few chapters have been more about like her romantic past and present rather than her friendships. At the beginning, it was more about, if she was going to be more friends with Betsy or more friends with Doreen, and that's kind of fallen to the wayside for the romance part of it. I'm getting more into it, which is good. I read like 40 pages in a chunk today, so a lot better flow today. So mentally I'm like more with it, but also I think I'm just getting into the book a little bit more. And I still really don't know what to expect, so I'll just have to wait and find out and enjoy the ride along the way. So I just finished chapter 8. I'm up to chapter 9. And in these last couple chapters, I really enjoyed hearing Esther's ideas about the sacrifices women have to make depending upon the future they choose for themselves. She was talking about how she imagined she could be a great magazine editor, or she could write poetry, or she could be a wife and have children. But she knew she could only choose one path, she was frozen trying to figure out what path she wanted to choose. She was also commenting about how Buddy said to her that once she had children, she wouldn't want to write poetry anymore. And how once you have children and get married, it's almost kind of like a brainwashing happens, and then suddenly that's all that you want to do. You wake up early, you cook food for them, you clean up after them, they go to school and work, then they come back and you cook and clean for them again, and then that's your whole day. For some reason, I didn't expect there to be feminist themes in here, but I've been quite enjoying that. I was also thinking how that's different now. For most people, not only just the fact that when you marry as a woman, you don't automatically lose your career, though there are more women who stay at home to care for their families than there are men, I believe. But I was also thinking of the idea that having just one career is no longer the norm for a lot of people. I mean, having a career in itself, I think, is not as common for a lot of people as maybe stereotypically I believed it to be, 20, 40 years ago. And just the idea that, if Esther was living today, she could right now pursue poetry, but then maybe after 10 years of doing that, being successful or no, then maybe she could switch to the magazine trade, or maybe she'd be working at a magazine while she was pursuing poetry at the same time, and then slowly work her way up to being an editor, and in 10, 15 years she would be that editor, and so she then would have to abandon her poetry, and then maybe in the middle of that she would get married and have kids and be able to do all of the things. And I wonder if her not being able to achieve those multiple dreams is an oversimplification in her mind, or a product of the times that she was living in, or something else. So I just finished chapter 12 in the bell jar. I'm up to chapter 13, and there's definitely been a huge shift in this narrative over the last few chapters where her mental decline has suddenly really become evident. If I remember correctly, she gets bad news about a summer program that she wanted to attend, and she didn't make it in, and I think from there, and she also had to move out of the New York hotel. Her month-long internship or whatever was done, and she had to move back in with her mother, which sounds like is always a stressful thing for Esther. So now she's in serious mental decline, and without any specific spoilers, she's made a couple plans to commit suicide already. She's already also been under the care of a psychiatrist, which was kind of hard to read about. He is a proponent of electroshock therapy. I'm getting into the flow of this a lot more now that she started to have a mental breakdown. I know that sounds probably callous. The writing style, which was kind of just disjointed and hopped around, I think now fits because I know, okay, this is how her mind is working right now when she's not in the best of mental health. She's also right now claiming to not be able to sleep, and that was the main thing that she was seeking help and then was referred to a psychiatrist, and she hasn't been able to sleep for 21 days now. And she says that she remembers watching the seconds tick by through the night on her alarm clock, and so unless she was dreaming that, she truly has been awake for 21 days, which is just an interesting idea. And I find myself wondering, is this truly a hallucination? Is her eyes seeing the clock, but somehow part of her brain has shut down in order to preserve itself and get the rest that it needs? So that's something that I keep kind of pondering in the back of my head. I have less than 100 pages to go, I think, so I'll keep working on it and keep you updated. So I just finished chapter 15, I have 5 more to go. I'll be finishing it later today. I had 2 thoughts, one of which positively affected me and one of which negatively affected me. So the positive thing was there's this passage where Esther is kind of talking about her options. She's still suicidal, still attempting, and she says that since she has been a failure at dying by suicide, that maybe she should just turn herself into the doctors. But then if she did, she would be subjected to electroshock therapy whenever they wanted, and she can't face the idea of that. And then also her family would be poor because they would put all of their money into trying to get her into a private institution with private rooms and privileges and stuff like that, and they would quickly run out of money trying to care for her that way. And then she would be put in like a county or state run hospital, and she said that she would end up in a big cage in the basement because that's where they hid you if you were the most hopeless case. And she's not wrong. And it's very sad. There's still this narrative within here, and I don't really think you can spoil this book. I don't know if the ending has something dramatic happen, but at this point it's pretty much just stream of consciousness seeing Esther as she spirals. And there's this idea that Esther is choosing to be the way that she is, to be depressed or to have psychotic episodes, whatever is going on with her. We don't have a diagnosis. And I find that just incredibly frustrating. Obviously, who wouldn't find that idea frustrating? If Esther could fix herself, then she probably would have done so, but she can't for one reason or another. But I did like that passage. I thought that kind of, it just struck home as a truth that I hadn't heard that way. But I very much believe that is the way that things are. And in fact, at one point she gets transferred to a different hospital because some random person who heard about Esther's story and had been sent to an asylum at one point in her life as well wanted to kind of sponsor Esther and her treatment, but her mother does mention that they were running out of money, which is just... And Esther, I don't think... There isn't a real sense of time passing at this point, but I don't think that Esther had been there for very long. So the bad thing, the thing that I didn't like reading was there was a quite racist passage in here where there is a black attendant at the mental hospital and Esther calls him the Negro, and then also when she's frustrated over being served 2 kinds of beans, green beans and baked beans, for dinner, she decides that it's his fault and she physically assaults him. She kicks him in his leg. So that made me disappointed and really uncomfortable. You can almost excuse any sort of behavior under the she's not mentally well sort of thing, but I think this does demonstrate for sure racism on her part, which is just like not fun to read about when you are stuck in the head of this character. But I have been enjoying the writing style more. I thought that some of the passages where she's describing her different attempts at suicide were very, very sad, but also really beautifully written. And just the desperation and the fact that she can't even manage to be successful at ending her life. There's just something incredibly heartbreaking about that. But yeah, the passage with the man who's just trying to do his job, and I think it was even like it seemed as though it was his first day on the job. Esther mentions that the way he was acting, it was like they were the first group of crazy people he had met, and he gets physically assaulted for no reason. So I will report back once I have finished the last 5 chapters, and let's hope that there are more good things to report. I mean, I don't think that the ending's going to be happy, but we'll find out. Okay, so last night I finished reading The Bell Jar, and I'm kind of indifferent about the whole thing, to be perfectly honest. The only thing I'll say about the ending was that it was a lot less dramatic than I was expecting, and dare I say that the book kind of promised, maybe. There was another awkward moment, and by awkward I mean incredibly disappointing moment of homophobia, so that wasn't great. I am mostly just incredibly curious why people love this book so much. I'm not pooping on it. I don't think it's bad or anything like that. But for me, it's possible that the hype and its reputation made me over-exaggerate my expectations or something. But I just don't really see why this is so lauded. At my snarkiest, my thought was, this is the most literary and classic of the young woman has a mental breakdown novels, and so if that is a subgenre, a theme, a plot that you really connect with, then this is kind of like the cream of the crop, perhaps. The most enduring of the stories, at least so far, since this is one of the earlier ones. I'm kind of ambivalent about Sylvia Plath as an author. I've never connected with her poetry, even when I studied it, which I have not done extensively. It just was never my jam. So I didn't expect to fall in love with her prose. And I do think that when I reread this, since I know what to expect now, that will help me pick out the details and really see what there is to appreciate. Whereas the bulk of this first reading experience, as with all first reading experiences, is you figuring out what actually is going on and what the story is going to be about. And because my expectations of this book were undermined time and time again, I remember saying at the beginning of this vlog that I was confused about why she wasn't visibly mentally ill yet, and I thought this was a novel about someone's mental breakdown. So from the very beginning, I think I've been having to reassess what I think this book is going to be, which is never a very promising sort of headspace to be in for truly appreciating the work for what it is. So at the end of my journey with The Bell Jar, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. It will be very interesting to chat with Acacia about The Bell Jar and see what her reasonings for loving this is, and seeing if I can kind of get a better grasp of the complexities or the nuances that I missed out, that she enjoys, because this is my first reading experience and I didn't really know what to expect. And I don't think I'm disappointed in how this came out. I truly do think that I was expecting The Bell Jar to be about a 3-star read, and I think a big part of that is Acacia and I, at least recently especially, have very little overlap in what we enjoy reading. So the books that potentially are the extremist forms of our preferences, the chances of them being in that little smidge of overlap was probably slim. So thank you for watching this reading vlog of The Bell Jar. Please check out our discussion on our favorite books in East of the Bell Jar. And I will also be posting another spoiler-free review of The Bell Jar in a more succinct form, just in case you don't want to just see me blather about it here. Thank you for watching, and until next time, continue to be lovely.